Kevin Snow. So, this week, what I would like to do is I would like to ask Kevin some questions. And then at the end of that time, if you have any questions, you can ask Kevin. And we'll see how this all goes. So, if you're on, I'm going to open up the chat so I can see any questions.
Great.
I did I did post this yesterday and then again early today, letting people know. So
Great.
hopefully people will slowly roll in. And
Excellent.
if not, then they'll have the privilege of seeing it on the replay.
Love that.
And as I don't know if you've been looking, but the first time we were on got some really good responses while we
Yeah,
were live, and then even on the replays on YouTube, people have been watching it. So
I
that's
did see that.
very
Yeah,
exciting.
much appreciated. Yeah, that's awesome.
Let me put a little caption up here for you so people know how to find
Mhm.
you if they want to email you a question or sign up for your newsletter or book a session with you. So that little ticker tape on the bottom will take care of that. And
Beautiful.
so I personally have been finding that the round the clock caretaking job that I do
Mm, yeah.
really holds a mirror up to my personal life and says, when are you getting to bed? When are you waking up? Are you making time for your practices? Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough roughage? Are you spending enough time in nature and all of these things? And I still haven't mastered it. I think that is part of
Mhm.
the whole initiation, is that, it's like consistency has always been a goal of mine, no matter where I'm living or what I'm doing. And
Absolutely.
I tend to step into the flow of consistency and
Mhm.
then fall off the bike again. So right now I've been in about a 2 or 3 week period of like, not very much meditation,
Mhm.
not the best hydration, um, haven't been to the woods in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
um you know and then there's homework that you give me to do, like there's some pretty simple things that are very helpful for me if I get up and make sure that those are the first things I do in the morning. That hasn't
Mhm.
been happening. And
Okay.
I know I'm not alone, because if you're human, unless you're retired or independently wealthy, you are pretty busy. And so
Even then.
I wanted
Yeah.
to get some tips for myself and for the audience, for anybody watching now and anybody watching on the replay, to best understand or learn. Hello, Jana. Thank you for joining us. I would like to learn how to make time to nurture ourselves and make time for our spiritual practice, even when we are extremely busy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is, I mean, it's such an important question, and certainly um, during different times of the year, like this holiday season, right? So, uh, things do fall to the wayside. I think that one of the best ways to understand it is that we live within the container of a week and a day, and then we also live in this container. I think we mentioned this last time, of this 72-hour period. And this has, we can definitely, go into that a little more, but it is this idea that if we live in these containers, then we can put certain things in those containers so that we're not doing everything every day. And so I do say this a lot in the work that I do and in my own life. And so it really is this kind of important thing that I realized is that, okay, I have a, let's just say loosely, a mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical body, right? And so I have to identify those things that help those bodies, and those are located in the chakras. And what can I do on a particular day? And how can that create a week? and how can that become consistent? And so that's when you're talking about consistency. I think we tend to put way too many things into the container and then say, I have to do all these things every day. And if I don't do all these things, then I'm going to fall off and experience, what we've talked about as far as reactivity. And so we're going to become more reactive and less responsive, and that logs into what we think of as stress and how we deal with stress. And so this is, how do we create, and create I think is a really important word, that from a place of stress, from a place of reactivity, it isn't a place of creativity. And so then we even have to identify that, like, how can I get this slowed down enough, or in a neutral, as I say a lot, just enough to where I can say, okay, this is the thing that I do today. And even if I do one of those things, I'm on track and I can help myself regulate in times of challenge stress. And so we can definitely go into the specifics of that, but the idea is we got to find a better starting place other than I'm just stressed and I've got all of these things on my list, and now I've got to add. So basically then we're just adding yoga and meditation and walking in nature and breathing and all of these things. Now it's just more things on my list. And so it can really become, these practices can become more stressful, unfortunately.
So I do want to address stress directly, but
Yeah.
I guess what I'm looking for is, so if you are a busy person and you're like me, you're on this wheel of consistency, you're in the flow, you fall off. Consistency, you're in the flow, you
Mhm.
fall off. How can I, no matter how busy I am or whatever,
Mhm.
make sure that I'm making time for my cobra breath practice, or
Mhm.
fitting in my water, or like whatever it is. I feel like I've tried every method in the book. I've tried,
Mhm.
just being and not worrying about it at all. I've tried, writing things down. Uh, I've tried like reminders on my phone. I feel like I've tried everything in the book, and I feel like I still
Mhm.
don't have this piece down.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have to look at what is the development, what is the, because that's in the main teaching about meditation that I make. It is, we practice meditation until we're drawn to it, until it's something that we are literally drawn to and it is drawn to us. And so that's where we see the things that aren't getting done. They're either not part, and this is what you're talking about, they're not part of a structure that we've created for ourselves, like brushing the teeth, and right. So these things that we integrate early on in our lives, and so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put something that I haven't integrated with something that I have. And so I've already integrated my altar, and I think we talked a little about that, but just basically interacting with my altar every day. And so before I had done that, I was using essential oils and still do. And what I do now is the essential oils are on the altar. What I did before it was integrated is I put them next to my toothbrush so that that is an already integrated practice. And then I would say, oh, yeah, I've got these three essential oils that I use. And I put one on the back of my neck, and I put one on the chakra, and I put one on the bottom of my feet. And so I can do, like, the bottom of the feet one is next to my shoes. And so these are really overly simple things that I actually do, that I really do think have worked for me. And so that's where I now interact with this altar, and I sit and I do the meditation. And so that all of that ritual practice can be done in that space. So I've created a specific space for that as well. So I think that's also really important. And so these things that we're stepping back and saying, here's the thing I want to do. Let me step back into what I'm actually doing. So I am going to sleep and waking up. And so in that going to sleep process, I do my breathing. And in the waking up process, I do my breathing. And so that I'm integrating that with the thing I'm already doing, and noticing that if I'm hitting the ground running, that's what I noticed about meditation. If your feet hit the floor, then you're probably not going to meditate unless you have a solid practice. And so then what we want to do is start creating that practice with integrating it into the waking state. So I'm coming into a waking state, and if I'm in a full house, if I've got a family, if I've got kids, if I've got animals, all of those things, responsibilities for work, all of those things can get me out of bed and start my day rolling. And if I can start that 10 minutes sooner with even pretending to myself that I'm not up and out of bed, and so that I can just do this breathing practice, I can do my gratitude practice, I can do, just a handful of things in that 10 minutes. That would be like a snooze button. And so we were having some fun with that and saying we should come up with something called snoozitation, right? So it would be the meditation that we do instead of the snooze button,
Yeah.
and so, or in conjunction with it, so that it isn't going back to sleep. It is doing a short 5 to 10 minute meditation. So that's really the key of that I found works for myself and mostly for my clients as well, is see if we can match it with something that you're already doing.
Okay. Um, Genre likes your word snoozitation. Um, so the other question I have is, I mean, I think this is a lifelong practice. And I
Hmm.
know a lot of people think about it because there's books written about it and movies made about it, and but I don't think everybody thinks about it. And but I think, right now the world is so volatile and there's so much coming at
Mm.
us, and it's really easy to go into uh duality, good, bad, right, wrong, and polarization. And you know I think, some people have this idea that to be neutral means to be detached. And to
Mm.
me, I see neutral meaning that I don't have a charge on something, that I don't run towards one side of the pendulum that might be positive and make
Mhm.
things overly flowery, or I don't go to the other side of the pendulum and just start venting and vomiting about something that really
Mm.
frustrates me. That even if I have, those charges, that I come to the middle, to a neutral place where I'm holding space for myself and not being reactionary,
Mhm.
which in turn, drains my energy and wastes my energy and gets me stressed. And so there are so many chances every single day, every time you open your phone, every time you turn on your computer, discussions with friends or family, neighbors, people in the street, who knows? But there is so
Yeah.
much opportunity to get hyped up, to get off track, to play in this place of polarity and duality. And
Mm.
you know, finding neutral isn't something that I've never thought about. It's something I think about all the time. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm able to pull it off, and many times I'm not. So I'm just wondering what you and Spirit have to say about that.
Absolutely. No, it's an excellent question because it is, once we get that we're really living on this spectrum of positive, negative, and neutral, that this is the way now to look at our lives and see if we can practice that. And most people, certainly first coming to this work, don't even know there is such a thing as neutral. Like, what is that? Like, what is the what is the construct essentially that you're talking about? This, because we put it into the non-dual. So that would be this, kind of coming out of the Eastern teachings, that there is a non-dual, and from that non-dual emerges duality. And so that's what we're talking about here is we think of the now. And so I like to think of the now as the not. And so it's just a way to kind of put it in a context of the spectrum does have a center point, and that center point is an access to the non-dual. So if we think of it like a teeter-totter, we're teeter-tottering in the positive and the negative. And another really important thing is not to judge either one of those as positive, good, negative, bad. It's just the polarity. And so when we teeter-totter, we come to this even place, and that's the scale that we're measuring. But that's where people will say, it's the now, it's the now, it's the now. That's still in time. And so we live in time and space. And so what we're doing and what we're teaching here is that we want to know that there is a place that is not time and space. That it actually, through a meditative practice, I can move through my chakras, upper and lower. That would also be the duality of that, into the heart, into this neutrality, in this connectivity to the non-dual. And so that's this concept that we're saying is it's not just in the middle of positive and negative, it's a portal out of positive and negative and back into a place of non-duality. And so, and we can feel that usually in meditation, you'll sense that where you'll be like, yeah, that was it. And then you're out and you're back in the polarity.
Mhm.
And so I really do think that's an important thing to the grounding of that message is that it's not just accessing a center place, it's accessing the portal too.
I'm only being silent because it was
Yeah, that's right.
so potent and revealing.
Yeah,
And so when you say the not as opposed to the now,
mm,
you're talking about the portal, like literally
yeah,
stepping out of time.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
some
Yeah,
people might get confused and think that's like being out of time means you're not here or something.
but
And
I think that's an excellent point.
that's definitely not true. So we want to
Correct.
clarify
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, so this is where you mentioned earlier the so if we think of this spectrum again, so we're thinking of this as and this again is just like when in sixth grade we looked at the light spectrum, right? So it's like here's this spectrum of light that our eyes can see. That's what I'm talking about here too, this spectrum of duality. And so we're saying essentially that we're able to access a certain amount of reality, duality, with our sense experience. And so that is the spectrum. And the spectrum is both positive and negative, light and dark. And and then what we put ourselves on is when we're closer to the center of that, then we're closer to that portal into neutrality and into non-dual. And then as we get farther out on that spectrum, the spectrum of what we think of as negative or dark becomes attachment. This is what I'm more and more and more attached to. And this is what I'm less and less and less attached to. And then what we're saying here is there's a place of dissociated non attachment where I'm still on the spectrum. I'm not in the non dual, but I'm dissociated from what's happening in my reality. Or I'm completely associated with it. I'm completely attached. So that's the spectrum. And that's why we say all of these teachings say, get back in the center. So not in this dissociated place and not in this attached place. And I put that like in relationship. A lot of people understand when I'm in a conflict in my relationship, what I'll do is usually one of two things. I'll either get super attached, and in that attachment, I'll have a reaction, and that reaction will be emotional. And that big emotional reaction will be part of this attachment, or I'll go into this shutdown place where I'll just leave. And that's not me in the non-dual oneness love God attachment. Right? So that place of I am connected to the oneness of all that is. That's me being completely in the struggle, but being dissociated from whatever the conflict is. And so both of those options, big emotional reaction and no reaction, is not essentially the optimum scenario. So that I'm able to, through my breath, through a regular practice, and that's why you're mentioning that first, that I've already got a place that I feel regulated that I can go to, and I know what to do to get to that place. That I know if I haven't eaten and I'm not hydrated and I'm completely stressed out, and now all this stuff gets piled on me, and I haven't slept, and I haven't, all these things that we know that are critically important. Now I'm going to just be in that duality, as opposed to being able to use my breath and my meditative practices to access the non dual. And as soon as I get there, now I can look at the duality of the situation, and it often is absurd, which certainly isn't helpful if you're in a conflict with a person to say, "Oh, that's totally absurd what we're doing here." Right? So also not helpful, but it's helpful for me to regulate so that I can see, oh, here's the perspective. We call it witness. And so basically, we can come into our witness self and see that witness self seeing us struggle. And so in that moment, now I can come back into a much more neutralized, non dual place. So I'm not attached to the argument anymore or the thing that's happening. And I'm more attached to, let's see if we can both come back into this place. And if we're both, if we both have that education and knowledge and practice, then typically we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the difference between duality and polarity?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it is, the perspective of it is the same. And so what we're saying is there's a place that is polarized. So it has an opposite, equal and opposite. And so what we're then giving language to, and I think that's the thing that I'm always trying to do in this work, is say a lot of times, I think we talked about this last time, but a lot of times people will say vibration or frequency or interchange those two words. And then what I try and do in that conversation is say that vibration is sound and frequency is light. And that registers in our brain pretty well as, this is the thing that we're talking about, is that sound, the sound of my voice, can enlighten you because it is a certain frequency. And so my vibration of sound becomes a frequency of light. And and so that's where we're understanding that I can say, oh, this is polarity, polarized, positive and negative, and that is a scientific language. So this outlet, and that's that this computer is plugged into, and that we're able to have this conversation because there's electricity, right? So that outlet is polarized. It has a positive and a negative that comes into a hot lead, and that hot lead basically only provides electricity safely with a ground. And so there's our positive, negative, and neutral again. And so we have those two slots and then the circle. And the circle basically runs to hopefully a metal stick that's stuck in the ground. And essentially that groundedness of the earth actually allows the electricity to do this alternating current thing that, basically was invented for us. And that current can alternate so that it isn't just always hot. And so this connection of positive, negative with the neutral can create electricity. And that's doing that in us all the time. And we can basically say negative chakras, the lower three, positive chakras, upper three, neutrality, heart.
Okay. Um, so what if you are okay, I'll just give you a real life example. I won't go into
Totally.
a whole big long story, but
Mhm.
the whole time that I've been here, I have been um, encouraging somebody to drink water because they're a person who has a history, an
Mhm.
83-year long history of
Mhm.
not drinking water.
Yeah.
And, so I was able to get them to say drink what, and that doesn't mean they're not drinking any fluids, but as far as straight
Right.
water, 1 glass
Totally.
a
Yeah.
day is all that I've been able to get them to drink. Now,
Okay. Yeah.
they ended up with a condition that you get when you don't eat enough fiber and drink enough water.
Makes sense.
And that condition worsened, and we ended up in the emergency room.
Mm.
And so now we're, and I had the doctor record on here why we're going to be drinking water, and
Okay, good.
I'm tracking everything. I'm tracking what this person is eating, what their bowel movements are like, water, everything. And I realize that a lot of this is a mirror, because what is my report card going to be when I'm this person's age? It's going to
Sure.
show, have I been taking care of my body, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a chance for me to up level. I get that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, in the position of being the cheerleader, being the one to encourage, and there was a discussion when we came home, like, this totally could have been avoided. Like, I've
Yeah.
been encouraging you all along, and,
Hmm.
you've met me with resistance, and
Hmm.
that's how you got
Yeah.
here, And I really don't want to do that again, and I think you don't want to do that again, so we're going to put these things in place, right? Well, I am a person who, even though I've been working on myself my whole life, I
Hmm.
don't walk on water. I don't stay
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
neutral all the time. I'm a human.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
this person, just an observation, not a
Yeah.
judgment, um,
Absolutely.
doesn't have a history of any of those practices or any of that,
Right. Hmm.
anything we talk about on here.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, with every glass of water that I go hand this person, I then not only, there needs to be encouragement coming in and checking and seeing, is it getting from here to here,
Totally.
and it's this
Yeah.
ongoing thing. And it's just like, yesterday, by the end of the day, I said, I would really just appreciate that you drink the water without me having to monitor you, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
I'm
huge.
not,
Yeah.
you're not a child, you're an adult, and I'm not your mother.
Hmm. Yeah.
But how do you help them
Yeah.
help themselves?
Yeah. It's an excellent question because this is definitely where, we talk about that psychologically as, is this, when I am caring for somebody, am I the person that has to regulate this? Am I the person that has to measure it and say, do this at this time? And your response to that is excellent because it is, we should be in a cycle in our own physical bodies where our body calls for water. And the only way that that happens is if we're just slightly underhydrated, not completely dehydrated. And so we think of this as a cycle and again as a spectrum because this is really helpful in my work is I'm always putting things on a spectrum and saying, okay, hydration basically happens 80%. So that I'm 80% hydrated up to 100% hydrated. And so my body actually will call for water within that 20%. So it'll do what it's supposed to do. If it's working and there's other things working, it'll actually call for that, like I'm thirsty. And so it'll create thirst. If it goes below 80% hydrated, you start losing the mechanism of thirst. And so the pituitary, basically, which calls for temperature regulation and calls for regulation within the body, will shut off and it will basically go into dehydrated, extremely dehydrated, into the minus numbers. Now we're like at zero, so no hydration, and now into the negative attribute of hydration, minus 20, minus 30, minus 40. When I typically measure somebody when I first start working with them, it's usually between 20%, not 20% down, but 20% hydration, and minus 40, minus 50, minus 60. And so there is no call for water. So there isn't a natural inclination to actually be thirsty when
So
you're
we're
down that
building it
low.
from scratch.
Exactly, right? So we're going to build, build, build. And the thing that builds hydration is actually minerals, mostly salt. And so when there is an absence of hydration, there's usually an absence of salt. And so that mineral context, that's why something like I'll do something like this, not advertising product, right? But saying, but I do because this product basically has sea salt in it and it has some minerals in it.
Mhm.
And so, and it has stevia in it, which I like. A lot of people have a different opinion about stevia, but I do like stevia. And so I'll do a beverage like this, but as a medicine, not as a drink. And so I'll drink like 2 to 4 ounces of this when I get up in the morning. And that'll kind of get my body starting to mineralize. And then of course I do everything on a pendulum, right? So in this way, I'll even check myself and I'll say, I'm running at about 70. So this will bump it up to 90. And then I will be thirsty. And when I work, I talk a lot. So I have water here all the time to drink. And so I'm drinking water and mixing it with something that is a mineralized hydration. Coconut water, excellent choice.
He can't stand it.
Yeah, right. So, this is really key because a lot of times we don't like something that we actually really need. And so this happens with essential oils a lot with people where I'll recommend one. They'll be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I hate that. I hate that oil." I'm like, "Yeah, because your body actually really needs it, and so you're in a resistance pattern, negative, with it. And if you actually had enough, if you trust the process and use it for a while, you actually will shift your desire or not desire for that oil. Same with hydration, same with, right? So things that work, this is why things that work often are a struggle because I don't like that or I don't want that. And so, and then you get into the allergy conversation a lot when you start talking about that, because it's also maybe something that the body has created an allergic reaction to, which is again, reaction. So it's kicking out a bunch of histamine and saying, you know, I love tomatoes. I haven't eaten a tomato in several years because they're high in histamine and I have a histamine issue. And so this histamine issue basically pushes me away or draws me to that particular thing. So
Mhm.
it's another way of understanding. Like when we hear that, it's like, now I'm curious, you don't like it. And so now we need to find out why. Is it something you really need? Or is it something basically that your body's saying, don't do that now. We need to get hydrated first.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of context there that we can look at, but this is where the helpfulness is curiosity. And so when we meet somebody in that curious place, like you're saying, assessing instead of judging, that we're just assessing the situation and meeting it in a curious place, like, I wonder why you don't like coconut water, instead of I just assume, right? That's just an assumption. You don't like it, then don't do it. As opposed to, sometimes we need to do things that we don't like.
Well, yeah,
Right?
this has been the conversation, not everything
Yeah,
goes in your mouth is for pleasure. It's for health and well-being,
exactly.
right?
Totally.
Oh boy, yeah, I think I better
Mhm.
not touch that one anymore today. Um,
Yeah,
but I will start adding. See, this is the thing too. Oh, I don't like the taste. So, but I
exactly.
will
Yeah.
start adding like uh, trace amounts of trace minerals because that's what I do. I mean, I've been forgetting
Perfect.
lately.
Yeah.
You just reminded me, but I add some trace
Mhm.
minerals to my own water.
Excellent. Excellent. It's really important. And we can add pH ourselves. We can put, apple cider vinegar, just a small amount in the drinking water that we're drinking.
Not for
And
this
that can,
person, maybe
right,
for
I know.
you,
Yeah.
but
And I do. I run into this all the time where I'll make a suggestion and get a huge reaction like, oh, there's no way I'm doing that. Like, wow,
Oh, yeah.
okay, that's curious. Okay, we'll see if we can figure that out.
Well, it's funny because this person is like, well, you know, I'm 84 and I've made it this far with water and I'm just fine. And I'm like, really? Because your
Right.
memory is going and
Yeah, definitely.
your low back hurts all the time and your knees
Mhm.
hurt all the time. And you're having to get all of your teeth pulled out and get dentures. I said, all of those are connected to the kidney, which is water element. And
Mhm.
you've got diverticulosis, which
Yeah.
is a long-term history of
Mhm.
not enough fiber and not enough water. So you're telling
Yeah.
me that you're fine because you've gotten this far. But I said, look where you are.
Excellent.
This is your report card, you know. So
What a
anyway,
great, I mean, so like you're saying, I mean, this is a great opportunity to use, your view, right? You're directly relating to this person. And so, and we're using that as a teaching tool here on the podcast, right? You're saying, this is not an unusual scenario for people to say exactly what you're saying, that I've been fine and it isn't fine, right? It's just not in your awareness. So, right, so these things are disconnected in most people's awareness. Low back pain, right, all the things you just mentioned. And this is really a great teaching tool to then say thank you for showing me that, because this is a great place that we can bring it as here's a story that it might sound familiar to you, either yourself or somebody you're living with or somebody you're in relationship with that might be saying these same things. And that's where we can get curious and say, there is some connections here. And there's a really overly simple book called The Body's Many Calls for Water, which is brilliant. And I don't remember the author at the moment, but check that out because that was a game changer for me. It's like these are all the ways that the body calls for hydration that we don't even know that it's doing that.
mm, well,
Yeah.
yeah, then there was this whole thing about like, yeah, there was this whole thing about, it's making me nauseous, and I was like, well, and
Yeah.
I explained all the reasons why that is too, and I was like, well, first of
Totally.
all,
Yeah.
for the past week, you haven't had a bowel movement, so your body has now
Mhm.
reabsorbed some of those toxins, and now you're
Yeah.
actually getting enough fluid in the body to push out those
Hmm.
toxins. And so you've got toxins running through your body, so you're feeling nauseous. I said
Exactly.
another thing is when you have all these evacuations, like you finally did, because your body
Hmm.
needed to, you lost a
Yeah.
lot of water too, so you don't have enough electrolytes. So you're also feeling
Correct.
nauseous from that, so and there was one other thing. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's I want to do a solo live soon about
Hmm.
all of the ways that we are out of touch with our body. And I think it
Absolutely.
applies to everybody. I
It
think it
totally does.
applies to everybody. At least I know
Yeah.
it applies to a majority of people. And there's an underlying thing here, which is um when you hear about people who like they don't go to the dentist or they refuse to go to the dentist or they go into this really anxiety state when they go to the dentist. And
That's me.
it's because of trauma with the dentist, sometimes
That's me.
even sexual abuse or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And and then so yeah, you get into that cycle of like no, because there's trauma
Absolutely.
there and you don't want to go to that
Hmm.
place because you don't want to revisit the trauma. Well, I've been here almost a year and I've been hearing what this person says
Yeah.
and how they think, and I know about their childhood, and I realize this person knows nothing about their body, about health,
Hmm.
or about how their body works. Nothing.
Yeah. Hmm.
And they're also a little bit checked out. And this isn't an age thing or memory thing. It's like
Yeah. Hmm.
they're not here.
Yeah.
And so I'm finally, after, being here long enough, I realized this is trauma from childhood. So it followed them their whole life.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
it ended up with this end of life report card, which is everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
And um it made me connect the dots that so many
Mhm.
people that are out of touch with their body or don't care, don't take the time to understand what they're living in, how it works, what it needs, how to nurture it, or even to care,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
um, it's because of trauma.
it is. It absolutely is. That's the foundation of mostly what we're doing here in this work. And, that's what we look for. That's the curiosity is, yes, the assumption is there's some traumatic event and trauma affects development. And that's why developmental psychology is really helpful in this way because we can say, is there's a big enough trauma that stops the development and it actually turns off curiosity and it turns off awareness because that's what it's built to do, trauma. And so as we loop back into it, then we're essentially saying, okay, now I can be with, I've got support. So I've got enough support where I can actually be with that. That's what I've done with my own teeth and my own fear of dentist, and found these places that were pretty traumatic actually, that I'd forgotten about, or they were there, but it wasn't like this was causal or contributor, right? And so, and then realizing that now I can go back in and actually do some work on that, which I have done, and notice the trigger is not there. And so now this panic attack trigger that I used to have, I do not have. I have a trigger still, and it isn't removed, but it is much less than it was. I mean, to the point where I could not get out the door to go to a dental appointment. And so now I can get out the door, and I've just recently had some stuff going on. And so I was able to do that. But I'm the guy that says, you need to put me out because I've got trauma basically because I wasn't put out. And so there are these things that go on with me. So I think your point on this is excellent, that if we have enough curiosity, we can meet people in that compassionate place and say, yeah, this is about a trauma. We don't have to do all the psychotherapy about the trauma. We can just say, let's be with it and say, this is most likely what's causing the behavior.
Mhm.
And now we can soften that behavior a little bit.
Mhm.
And that's what you're doing by, saying there's some of these things that are overly simple that we don't do. They are still trauma triggers. They're still triggered from childhood and
Mhm.
trauma. And so that's where we're saying that and saying, well, just be compassionate with it.
Well, and also, there's there's a history of alcoholism there, which means
Yeah.
that there's a history of dehydration, right?
Most
He
most people do.
means you're
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
I like dehydration. That's my thing.
Well,
That's
people
my
do.
thing. Don't
Yeah.
hydrate me. Don't hydrate me. You know.
Exactly, right? I mean, I think it's wonderful from that standpoint because we're saying this is the mechanism that works, right? Alcohol is a substance that does a very specific thing, and it is really specific medicine for trauma. It doesn't heal the trauma, but it definitely turns the trigger off. And so that's where we acknowledge and say, I get that this works. And also, if we go through the struggle of getting hydrated, which there is a struggle there, because it is,
I'm
right, we
living
do
it
have,
every day.
right, so we do have kind of a sick feeling. That is the nausea and the things that exactly how you described the toxicity. I always think of it as, you watch the back of a toilet fill up, right? So that's how we hydrate. It fills, 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 and then that little thing basically says, okay, now you're full. And then we go through the day, right?
Mhm.
And we drop that down below 80%, raise it up to 90, down below. That's the dance, right? But when it goes way down below, you've got a ways to come back. And so that's that thing that you're talking about. And it does relate to drinking sugared pop and drinking, there's all kinds of things to drink these days that are not super helpful for
Yeah.
hydration.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Um. Hmm. Well, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Hmm. There were two from Anna, but I'm just trying to distinguish one from the other.
Right,
Um.
right.
Well. Um. So Anna, grandmother of Jesus, is somebody that I have um conversations with sometimes, and I let her know that I was going to be coming on the show with you, and I said, hey, here's my questions for her, but I mean for him, but um, do you have any questions you would like me to ask? And she said to ask you about strength. She
Mm,
she said she was talking about how stress wears on the mind and the body,
mm,
and that right now humans have so much stress,
yeah,
so it's super important to address it because being a human on planet Earth right now is simply not easy.
that's
So I
true.
guess she must be tying that with strength because she started talking about strength, and
Yeah.
then she went to stress, and then she came back. She said, ask Kevin from where we draw this strength and
Mm.
how we nurture and cultivate it, and how vulnerability plays a role.
Ah, yes, absolutely.
Oh, and the next question, yeah, she did give me another question, but let's start there. Yeah.
Okay, no, I think that's an excellent way to think about, right? The word strength and how we use that word a lot, and we usually use it as like one of my teachers, power versus force. And so, this idea that we can have a personal power and we can force things into the world, and we have these abilities to do different words that mean different things according to physical strength, right? Muscle strength, body integration, right? So that my chakras are integrated, my hormones work together. So, how we're going to answer that is we're basically going to say being integrated is strength. And so being at a developmental level that is appropriate, so age appropriate and situation appropriate, is strength. So that we build strength physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even in the chakra system, sub physically, which would be our microbiome, and astrally, which would be this big connection in this crown chakra. And so, astral, sub physical, emotional, mental, subtle in that third eye, and temporal as the heart. And so, those are the words that I use. And of course, we could probably teach 20 classes in what I just said there, right? So this idea is that the integration of trauma equals strength, like we were talking about earlier. So if we're able to come to a place, and we'll clarify what integration means, that I go back and I find it, because most trauma is still in the subconscious. It's been put somewhere so that it isn't activating us constantly. And we can look at that in the physical body as well and say the body does that. The body will take toxicity and put it in tissue somewhere else. It'll move it away from the heart, and so essentially, it will do that. So our mental emotional selves, subconscious, does the same thing. It compartmentalizes it somewhere for a time that you can revisit it. And if we're acting in this way and we're working with meditation and prayer and all of that, we can have the trauma and then a day later basically do the work on it. And the work would be release emotion. We talked about that last time. So taking our emotions and putting them into the earth, or giving them to the mother, so that they're no longer in us. And so when we release the emotion, so we can do that two different ways. We can run it through us and then put it in the earth, or we can just put it in the earth and say, I'm angry, sad, and afraid about this, into the earth, connection to the sky or the father. That basically would be, this is what my belief system is. I'm abandoned, I'm not enough, things are not fair. Those all go to the father, to sky. So father sky, mother earth, and this shamanic tradition. When I get to that place, I can be disappointed, not appointed to something, connected or attached, because I have released the emotion and the belief. And so now I can actually get to a place where I can surrender. That's why when we talk about surrender, surrendering is a really critical component, but we have to do those other two things first. And once we do that, we can surrender. Once we surrender, we can accept. And so that's where acceptance falls into that system. Once we've done all of that, we get to a place of forgiveness. So oftentimes people will say, I've forgiven. And I check into it, ask the guides, mentally, you have forgiven. Emotionally, no. Physically, no. Spiritually, no. Subtly, astrally, no. And so, what do? That's when we just do this, and we've done this, and so it's this system of just repeating it. So we can just say, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, into acceptance. So I accept, I accept, I accept, I accept. When all of that is done and we're into the forgiveness, I usually not forgiveness of others, but self. I forgive myself. Then we come to gratitude, full circle. So that's a ton of content that I just delivered there, but this is the integration system of trauma that will allow us to be strong. That gives us strength. And so, like the strength card in the tarot basically means I'm connected to something bigger than me, so I am strong. So that's a simplicity of spiritual strength equals physical strength because I know I'm not doing this alone. I've got help. Critical component of this work as well, where I'm not alone. I can ask for help from this metaphysical world and I can see evidence that I got it. And we've talked about the synchronicities and how we can see these evidential things. And I asked for that help and it showed up. And so now I have faith. I have built faith from my trust. So again, strength is this combination of putting these words together: trust, faith, diligence, compassion, courage, patience, and gratitude. And we put all those words together, those are words for the chakras. And when we get them all together, we're in a place of strength, not in a place of forcing ourselves into the world, but in a place of I'm integrated with this thing that I live in: physical, non physical, talking about the polarity, and spiritual, non dual. And so that's this place where I can become stronger. And that goes all the way back to our very beginning, where we say, if I do a little breathing exercise and I meditate and I do some strength training and I drink enough water and I go for a walk in nature, all of those things equal a stronger Kevin.
Wow. You've shared with me. Oh, I want to ask you a question about the word astral, but first I want
Hmm.
to ask you. Uh, oh, you have a great perspective on the word forgive and what it means to
Yeah.
forgive, and it's
Yeah.
not the way most people think of it. So, could you share
Yeah.
that, please?
Totally. We'll just elaborate on what we just talked about because that was a lot of stuff that I just shared there. But to simplify all of that, it is to give away before. So think of the
Forgive.
word, right? And what are you giving away before what? Before this belief and this emotion causes this chemistry in the physical body. That's stress. So my thought equals a belief. That belief lands into an emotion. That emotion lands into a physical creation of chemistry: adrenaline, cortisol, histamine, right? There's a whole host of chemicals that are created. That is stress. Now, those stress hormones are going through my body. That's how not forgiving creates stress, and how forgiveness, to give the emotion, anger, sadness, fear, away, to put it somewhere and actually know that it's there and not in me, and to put the belief structures, abandonment, not enough, not fair, away into the sky, into the clouds, away from me. Now I'm not creating the chemistry because those triggers, those neurotransmitters are not feeding into the next receptor site and creating the next thing. And so, disease model is, so if we trace this back and say, here's the disease, and that's the physical manifestation in our cells from the overabundance of cortisol or adrenaline. And that cortisol and adrenaline come from my emotional reactivity, not from my ability to respond, but from my ability to react. And that's fight, flight, or freeze. And so that construct is I'm creating that chemistry by my reaction. And so that's why I have to learn how to come into my breath, how to come into that place that is non dual and short circuit that process. And so that's what we do when we forgive: give away the emotion, give away the belief. Now I'm in a place of I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. So I just encourage listeners to get to that level of being able to say that and feel not so much yet, right? Still feeling emotion. I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. No, I don't. I'm angry. Right. And so, and then shake it off and do the things that we do to relieve that anger and keep moving it out of the body till you really can say, I surrender, and there isn't a trigger emotion that's coming up. And
So we
so
did.
forgiveness is that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Once again,
Yeah.
I'm going to be rewatching this to learn. The last one we did, I watched a few times because I learned so
Me
much.
too.
Um,
I did too. Yeah, because it's coming through me too. So it's good for me
yeah,
to watch it too.
that's awesome. Okay, to recap what you were saying. So we give our emotions to the Mother Earth, and
Mhm.
we give our thoughts and beliefs to the Father Sky. And some people might also already have um, someone or something that they consider their divine mother and father. Isn't that
Absolutely.
true? So you can give,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like, if I were saying that, okay, Mary Magdalene is my divine mother and
Mhm.
Yeshua is my divine father. So I could imagine Mary Magdalene holding a bowl and I could put my emotions in that bowl. And then
Beautiful.
with Yeshua, would I imagine him holding a bowl also and
Yeah.
put my thoughts in that bowl?
Totally.
So,
The visual that I use is light at that point because light is more associated with this higher realm. And so what I use from the like the crystalline bowl for the mother would be like a pillar of light for the father. And so
oh,
and that
okay,
usually like most of the fathers throughout our history are carrying some kind of staff.
okay,
So they're usually the guy with the staff.
yeah,
And so that would
the
be
chalice and the
where to put it.
blade, or
Exactly, right?
something like
So
that. Okay,
absolutely. So that's where putting it into the light in some way, and that's why to the sky and to a father figure in that way. So that can be this eternal father, this divine father, where, and that is a tough one to find. So, I mean, definitely could do a whole show on that probably, but this challenge of finding the father figure that represents this. And so in Yeshua's work of, I give this to you, hence it's not in me anymore. And that gives me ability to short circuit my chemistry process. And but you're absolutely right. There's lots of
short
different
circuit in
access
a good
points.
way, you mean?
Oh
Like
yeah, definitely.
stop it before it happens. Yeah, not
Totally,
yet.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that word forgive, and that's just came through as, one of these guidance things, like, yeah, to give away before,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
before it becomes a physical disease in my body. And that's a really good motivator because, like you have shared, these actions that we take based on stress do become physical. They have a way of finding their way into physical discomfort and disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, great question, Anna. Great answer, Kevin.
Yeah,
And
excellent. All
spirits.
right.
Um, so let me check out Anna's
Yeah.
second half of her question. I think you may have just covered it. Let's see. Oh, she says it's good for me to ask how the chakras tie into all of this, which you did say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so then, you know, ah, I I don't think I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, and I'm not attached to your answer. And but I'm wondering if so the first time we talked, we said, excuse me, the first time we talked, um, I asked if you would like to come back, and you said yes, and here you are.
Yeah.
So one idea that I had was, and you already have this on Spotify, but
Mhm.
we can't count on everybody to go to Spotify and watch that,
Totally. Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Mhm.
I was wondering if you would be willing to come on here once a month and we could work our way from the root chakra to the crown chakra and just discuss one chakra per month, like very similar
Yeah.
to what's on
Definitely.
Spotify. So like, okay, Here's how you know it's imbalanced. Here's some of the emotions that go with that chakra. Here's the
Great.
color. Here's the appropriate essential oil. Here's the process of, forgiveness or whatever, like how to work, here's the hormones
Mhm.
that correspond. Here's the word that correspond, just everything, like a nice little package, like what is in that chakra, how you work with that chakra, all like a little
Perfect. Yeah.
like that.
I love that. I do. And I think it's just this critical component, like we said, of the building or development and understanding that we develop as humans. So we go to school, right? We're preschool and school and right. So the same process, chakras. And so, and there's information, and most of the stuff that I'm sharing is kind of a combination of what I've learned through books and teachers and guides. And so it'll come through like, this is the oil. This is the oil for this particular chakra. So
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. That would be fun.
that would be fun. So if we started in January, February, March, April, May,
Mhm.
June, July, by July we would have completed them.
I love that. That's great. Yeah.
Yay, that would be awesome. um Jana was watching. I think she
Mhm.
must have had to go. So that means that there's nobody on here to ask us any questions.
That is all right. But you can do that, right? Just put that out and say, if there's questions based on what we talked about here or something that came up while you were listening, just do that in that YouTube place and we'll see if we can, I can
Yeah,
access that when it's posted on YouTube and
yeah,
we'll say, okay, we'll do that on the next thing we talk about, or we'll do it even, as a way
okay,
to interact directly. So
yeah.
absolutely. I think it's just
I'll
critical to be able to ask questions about this stuff.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that every time. And once I go post this, I will
Yeah.
put it in the comments. I'll say, "Hey, if you have any questions, come back the next time with them." Or I could say, I don't know, what could I do? I could say, if you have any questions, leave them here, and I guess you could occasionally check in on the video and see if anybody has a question
Totally.
for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I'm being much more diligent in my teacherness this coming year. So I
Yay.
think that we're going to do, I think, like an every other Wednesday class. And so,
Mm.
and I've, tried to put pedagogy together in classwork. And because that structural stuff, you can kind of see I'm just, listening to the guidance and ticking it out. So I think that's what we're going to do is just kind of say, this is the structure of the class and we'll see what happens, but it'll be similar to this, it'll be Zoom or something, so we're definitely going to do that in the coming year.
Is it a class that any of your clients can take?
Absolutely, yeah, so that's what it'll be, is kind of this open door to stuff that we're personally working on that you want to bring into a classroom environment, like we said, bringing in just the constructs, the things that we're working on, so it's not directly personal, but that it's like this is what humans work on. And we can get guidance, we can ask questions on the pendulum. I think it'll be, that's the way that it's coming through to me, is just kind of keep it open to, all right, let's find out what the questions are and we'll get the guides to help us out.
Excuse me, did you send an email out about that?
I think it'll be this week. So I think it's either this one or this week's
Okay.
or next week's email. Yeah.
So if
Mhm.
you're listening now or on the replay, you just heard Kevin say that. Oh, and when does it start, Kevin, your class?
So it'll be the second week in January. So it'll be on a Wednesday. So that's the guidance, is to do
And
it
is it
Wednesday
going to be
evening. Yeah.
second Wednesday of every month
Yeah.
for a year?
Yeah. I know. So yeah, definitely. So we're just gonna launch it and we're gonna say we can either put it in the container of like an 8 week. We don't totally know that yet. Like
Mhm.
it'll be 8 weeks or 16 weeks, like a
Okay.
semester, just how
Yeah.
we know how to do school.
Okay.
And then we'll revisit, bring more people in, that kind of thing.
Okay. So for anyone interested in taking a class with Kevin beginning in
Yeah,
January, you'll see on the ticker tape below here is a how to get a hold of him.
perfect.
So I would say I would ask you, please don't leave once I end the live stream, okay?
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay. So everybody, Kevin and I are going to bid you adieu. We thank you whether you listened live or on the replay, and we'll be back next month with Chakra 1. Take care, everybody,
Excellent.
and thank you for watching. Thank you, Kevin, so much.